The crystal chandelier in the Weaver dining room hung like a silent, glittering judgment. Every facet caught the light, reflecting the polished mahogany table, the gleaming silver, and the faces of Logan's parents, Deacon and Celeste. I sat across from them, my spine ramrod straight, a polite smile plastered on my face, and a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. This was it, the long-awaited, much-delayed introduction. Logan, my husband of 3 years, cleared his throat. He was 36, impeccably dressed, and radiating the kind of effortless charm that had once completely disarmed me. Now it just felt like a well-practiced performance. He gestured vaguely in my direction. Mother, father, this is April. Celeste, 64, a woman whose pearls looked like they'd been passed down through generations of ice queens, offered a thin-lipped smile. Deacon, 67, a man whose presence filled the room like an old, overstuffed armchair, merely grunted. I waited. For my last name. For some context, for anything that acknowledged the life we'd built, the vows we'd exchanged in a quiet courthouse 3 years ago, when I was 30 and Logan was 33. Logan continued, his voice smooth, almost casual. April's been a tremendous help around the house lately. She's our new housekeeper. The words hit me like a physical blow, a cold, sharp shock that stole the air from my lungs. Housekeeper, not wife, not partner, not even a friend. Housekeeper. My mind reeled, trying to process the sheer audacity, the deliberate cruelty of it. My polite smile didn't falter, but behind my eyes, a switch flipped. Celeste let out a delicate, tinkling laugh. Oh, how wonderful, Logan. Good help is so hard to find these days. Does she iron? Deacon chuckled, a deep rumble in his chest. Make sure she knows how to handle the silver, son. Some of these new girls are all thumbs. They spoke over me, around me, as if I were a piece of furniture, a new acquisition to be discussed and appraised. I was 33, a woman who had once navigated high-stakes business deals, who had built a career on sharp intellect and even sharper instincts, and I was being treated like someone who dusted their antique collections. My composure held. It always did. That was one of the first lessons Logan had taught me. Never let them see you crack. But as their laughter faded into the clinking of cutlery, my mind drifted, pulled back by the sheer force of the betrayal. 3 years ago, the courthouse was small, almost anonymous. Logan had squeezed my hand, his eyes earnest, full of a love I'd believed in with every fiber of my being. We'll keep this just for us, April, he'd whispered, his breath warm against my ear. My family. They're a lot. They'd never understand. I need to protect you from their judgment. I'd believed him. I'd believed his promises of a future where our love was enough, where my quiet strength would be valued, where one day, when the time was right, he'd introduce me as his wife. I'd sacrifice my own burgeoning consulting career, pouring my energy, my network, my strategic mind into his ambitions, into salvaging his father's crumbling manufacturing empire from the shadows. I'd been his ghost, his unseen architect, all for this, for him to introduce me as the help. Back in the present, Celeste was asking Logan about the new wing of the country club. I nodded vaguely, my eyes fixed on the intricate pattern of the tablecloth. The knot in my stomach had hardened into a cold, dense stone. The polite smile felt like a mask, and behind it, a different kind of smile began to form. A slow, chilling curve of my lips. My right hand, unseen beneath the table, slipped into my handbag. My fingers closed around a slick, heavy envelope. It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't a thank you note. It was something far more satisfying. And as Logan's parents continued their oblivious chatter, treating me like an invisible servant, I pulled the envelope out, just enough for my thumb to trace the raised lettering on its surface. A genuine smile, cold and razor sharp, finally touched my lips. The cold smile I'd worn at the dinner table, the one that promised retribution, was a product of years of quiet accumulation. It wasn't born in a single moment of humiliation. It was forged in 1,000 tiny cuts, each one logged in a mental ledger I'd kept since Logan first started building his world on my back. Let me rewind. 2 years ago. I was 31, Logan was 34. We were still living in the modest townhouse we'd bought together before we got married, a place that felt like ours, not just his. My consulting career was taking off, and I was excited about a new venture with my friend, Reagan. But Logan had other plans. His father's company, Weaver Manufacturing, was a dinosaur. Deacon had run it into the ground with old-school thinking and a refusal to adapt. Logan had always talked about taking over, about modernizing it, but he lacked the strategic mind, the financial acumen, the sheer grit to do it himself. That's where I came in. "April," he'd said one evening, leaning against the kitchen counter, looking earnest and a little desperate. "My father's company is circling the drain. He's too proud to admit it, too stubborn to take advice from anyone, especially a woman. You know how he is." I knew. I'd heard the stories. Deacon Weaver believed women belonged in the home, or at best, in secretarial roles. "So what do you propose?" I'd asked, already sensing the direction this conversation was headed. "I need your brain, April, your contacts, your understanding of the market, but it has to be quiet. You could consult for me unofficially. I'd present your ideas as my own. It's the only way Deacon would ever listen. He'd never accept female leadership, especially not from someone like you, outside the family." Someone like you. Even then, the phrase pricked. But I loved him. I believed in his vision, in our vision, even if it meant working in the shadows. He promised it was temporary, a stepping stone. He promised that once the company was stable, he'd bring me into the light, introduce me properly. So I agreed. I put my own dreams on hold. I started working, not directly for Weaver Manufacturing, but through a series of ghost clients, shell companies I set up that would funnel my advice and strategies to Logan. He'd then present them as his brilliant insights. I spent countless nights poring over balance sheets, market analyses, and supply chain logistics. I connected him with my network of industry contacts, people who owed me favors, people who respected my work. I crafted intricate restructuring plans, negotiated deals, and identified new revenue streams, and it worked. Slowly, painfully, Weaver Manufacturing started to turn around. The numbers improved, the debt stabilized. Logan started getting accolades, whispers of a boy wonder saving the family legacy. He'd come home, beaming, telling me about the praise he'd received. "You're just so good at support, April," he'd say, kissing my forehead. "You really know how to back me up. I couldn't do it without you." Support? Not architect, not strategist, not the person who actually did the work. Just support. Each time it was a tiny, almost imperceptible sting, a small entry in the emotional ledger I was unknowingly building. He dismissed my late nights, my missed opportunities, my intellectual contributions as mere help. He'd take credit for my ideas in front of others, then pat my hand later and say, "You know how important it is for me to look strong, honey." I started documenting everything, not just the financial transactions, but the conversations, the dismissive comments, the subtle gaslighting. It started as a way to track my contributions, to quantify my worth in a world where it was constantly being minimized. But as the slights piled up, it became something else, a record of betrayal. One afternoon, about a year into my ghost consulting work, so roughly a year ago from the present dinner, and 2 years after we married, I was tidying up Logan's home office. He was out, at a golf game with Deacon. I found a stack of legal documents on his desk, tucked beneath a pile of old magazines. It was a draft of a prenuptial agreement, dated just a few months after our secret wedding. My heart hammered against my ribs. A prenup? He'd never mentioned it. I knew he was from a wealthy family, but we'd agreed to keep things simple, to trust each other. I scanned the document, my eyes flying over the legalese. Then I saw it. A subsection, buried deep within the clauses about asset division. It listed me, April Walker, as a non-primary asset, and then a chilling addendum, a brief, almost casual note in the margin, scrawled in Logan's familiar handwriting. Housekeeper, if needed for optics. The world tilted. Housekeeper. Not just for optics with his parents, but in his own legal documents. In his own mind. That's all I was. A disposable, non-primary asset. A housekeeper. The anger was a slow burn, a cold fire that ignited deep within me. It wasn't the prenup itself that broke me. It was the casual, calculated dehumanization. It was the confirmation that he'd never seen me as an equal, never as a partner, never as his wife, just a tool, a useful, quiet tool. I carefully put the document back exactly where I'd found it. My hands didn't shake, my face was impassive, but inside, the ledger was no longer just a record of injuries. It was a blueprint, and the first line of that blueprint was drawn right then. The moment I saw that prenup, that casual, cruel scribble about me being a housekeeper for optics, something shifted. The quiet rage I'd been cultivating found its purpose. I wasn't just documenting betrayal anymore. I was preparing for war. My first call, discreetly made from a burner phone I'd bought with cash, was to Reagan Green. Reagan, 35, my best friend and former business partner, was the only person I trusted implicitly. She was sharp, cynical, and had a ruthless streak I admired. We'd built a successful boutique consulting firm together before Logan convinced me to go ghost. April, is that really you? Her voice was a mix of surprise and concern. We hadn't spoken properly in months, not since Logan started isolating me, claiming my old connections were a distraction. It's me, I said, my voice low. I need your help. I need to disappear professionally and then reappear as someone else entirely. I laid it all out for her. The secret marriage, the ghost consulting, the years of quiet humiliation, and finally, the prenup. Reagan listened, silent and grim. When I finished, there was a pause. That bastard, she finally said, her voice tight with fury. I knew he was a snake, but this, April, we're going to burn his world down. And so, the plan began. Reagan was instrumental. She helped me establish a new corporate identity, a shell firm called Atlas Core. It was designed to be untraceable back to me, at least initially. We started small, buying up distressed assets, building a quiet reputation in the market. I used the money I'd secretly saved from my own consulting work, the funds Logan never knew I had, to seed the venture. It wasn't much at first, but it was enough to get the ball rolling. While Reagan was setting up Atlas Core, I reached out to Zaley Harris. Zaley, 28, had been my young, bright assistant during my ghost consultancy work for Logan. She was incredibly organized, meticulous, and had a knack for being in the right place at the right time. More importantly, she was fiercely loyal to me. I'd always treated her with respect, something Logan and his family never extended to anyone they considered staff. Zaley, I'd said, meeting her in a coffee shop far from Logan's usual haunts. I need to know everything about Weaver Manufacturing's true financial state. No holds barred. Zaley's eyes widened. Ms. Walker, I have a lot of things. Logan always had me keeping separate files, just in case. And there were some calls. He didn't know I was recording. She then revealed a treasure trove of information. Deacon's company wasn't just struggling. It was on the brink of collapse, far deeper in debt than anyone, even Logan, seemed to realize. There were hidden liabilities, mismanaged funds, and a series of disastrous investments that Deacon had kept off the official books. Zaley had copies of everything: internal memos, unaudited financial statements, even recordings of Logan and Deacon discussing ways to hide the true extent of their financial woes from potential investors. It was a gold mine. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about a legitimate, strategic acquisition. The more I delved into the data Zaley provided, the clearer the path became. Weaver Manufacturing was ripe for a hostile takeover, not just the company, but their entire portfolio of assets, including the estate. The memory of one particular night still burned, fueling my resolve. It was about a year ago, so I was 32. Logan was 35. We were at a charity gala, one of the few times Logan allowed me to accompany him publicly. I was dressed in a gown he'd picked out, a quiet, almost invisible shade of gray. He'd introduced me to a few acquaintances, vaguely as April. Later, I overheard him talking to a group of his friends, laughing. "Oh, April. She's basically staff. My parents sort of tolerate her because she keeps the house running smoothly. You know how it is with good help." The words had twisted in my gut. Staff. Good help. It was a constant, insidious drumbeat, eroding my sense of self-worth, pushing me further into the shadows. But that night, it didn't just hurt. It solidified my resolve. I wouldn't just tolerate it. I would dismantle it. Over the next few months, working with Reagan and using the information from Zaley, Atlas Corp began its quiet ascent. We strategically acquired small, struggling firms in the same sector as Weaver Manufacturing, building a legitimate portfolio. We secured lines of credit, established a strong market presence, all while keeping my involvement a closely guarded secret. Then, the opportunity presented itself. A small, obscure holding firm, heavily leveraged and on the verge of bankruptcy, owned the majority stake in the land and property where the Weaver estate stood, and also held a significant portion of Weaver Manufacturing's intellectual property. It was a complicated, almost untraceable web of ownership, designed to protect the Weaver family assets from creditors. But I, with Zaley's meticulous records and Reagan's legal expertise, understood the intricate layers. It took months of careful maneuvering, of shell corporations and anonymous bids. But a few weeks ago, Atlas Corp quietly acquired 51% control of that holding firm. The paperwork was signed, sealed, and filed. The ownership had transferred. Logan, Deacon, Celeste. They were still living in their grand estate, still believing themselves untouchable, still oblivious that the ground beneath their feet now belonged to me. They didn't know it yet, but they would, soon. The dinner continued, a slow, agonizing waltz of veiled condescension. Celeste, 64, was in her element, her voice a soft, purring hum as she directed questions at Logan about his latest business dealings, occasionally flicking a dismissive glance my way. "So, April," she began, her tone sweet as poison, "Logan mentioned you're helping out around the house. Do you find the work fulfilling?" Her eyes lingered on my hands, as if searching for calluses. My internal monologue was a cutting blade, precise and sharp. Fulfilling? I salvaged your son's career. I pulled your family's crumbling empire back from the brink, and I'm about to dismantle everything you hold dear. Does that sound fulfilling, Celeste? But my outward expression remained serene. It has its moments, I replied, my voice calm even. There's always something new to learn. Deacon, 67, grunted, engrossed in carving his roast. As long as she knows her place, Logan, that's the important thing. Celeste chuckled. Indeed. We had a girl once. Thought she was one of the family. Quite the mess when we had to let her go. She paused, taking a delicate sip of wine. Does she serve Logan or just join in? Logan, 36, shifted uncomfortably, a flicker of something that might have been shame in his eyes before it was quickly masked by his usual charm. April's a guest tonight, Mother. Just relaxing. A guest. The word tasted like ash. I was a guest in my own house, a house I now legally owned. The irony was a bitter, satisfying tang on my tongue. My mind, however, was already several steps ahead, replaying conversations and planning the next moves. Just a few weeks ago, after Atlas Corp had quietly secured the 51% controlling stake in the holding firm that owned the estate, I'd met with Addison Underwood. Addison, 40, was a real estate agent I'd known from my previous life, a no-nonsense professional who specialized in high-value properties and, as it turned out, foreclosures. So you want to initiate foreclosure proceedings on this estate? Addison had asked, her eyebrows raised, as I handed her the property deeds and the legal documents proving Atlas Corp's ownership of the holding firm. We were in a discreet coffee shop, far from prying eyes. That's right, I'd confirmed, and I need it handled with absolute discretion until the very last possible moment. Then, I need it to be very public. Addison had nodded, her expression grim but understanding. It's a big move, April, but if the paperwork's clean, it's entirely within your rights. I can show you how to file the initial notice, get the ball rolling. We'll need to serve them properly, of course. She then walked me through the intricate steps, explaining the legal notices, the timelines, the public filings. I'd absorbed every detail, mentally ticking off each box. Back at the dinner table, the conversation turned to Deacon's latest legal woes. Herbert Mills, 45, the family lawyer, was present, a quiet, almost invisible man who usually kept to himself. He was currently trying to restructure some of Deacon's more egregious debts. The tax records are a nightmare, Deacon, Herb said, sighing as he reached for his wine glass. He gestured vaguely at a worn leather briefcase he'd placed on the floor beside his chair. I swear, half of these filings are missing, and the ones we have, he trailed off, shaking his head. My ears perked up. Missing tax records? Zaley had given me a lot, but a complete recent set of the family's personal tax filings, especially those tied to the estate's various trusts, would be invaluable. A few minutes later, as the dessert plates were being cleared, Herb excused himself to the restroom. He stood up, and in his haste, his briefcase tipped slightly. A thin manila folder crammed with papers slid out and landed silently on the plush rug beneath the table, unnoticed by the others, who were still debating the merits of the creme brulee. My eyes darted to it. It was clearly marked, Weaver Estate, 2022-2023 tax filings, draft. My heart gave a quiet thrum. This was it. My hand, steady and precise, slipped down, retrieving the folder. I didn't even glance at it, simply tucked it under my napkin, then placed my hand over it, feigning a thoughtful pose. A few seconds later, I excused myself, claiming a need for the ladies' room. Once there, I quickly photographed every page with my burner phone, then returned the folder to its original spot before Herb came back. He wouldn't even know it was gone. As I sat back down, Logan reached across the table, his hand briefly touching Celeste's pearl necklace. It was a subtle gesture, almost imperceptible, but I saw it, and my blood ran cold. That necklace. It was a string of perfectly matched, luminous pearls. I knew them. I knew them intimately, because they had once been mine. Logan had given them to me on our first anniversary, a quiet, private moment in our small townhouse. For you, April, he'd said, fastening them around my neck. to remind you of how precious you are to me. I'd worn them only a handful of times, always for special occasions, always feeling a quiet pride in them. Then, a few months ago, I'd noticed they were gone from my jewelry box. I'd asked Logan, and he'd waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, I probably put them in the safe. Don't worry about it." Now Celeste wore them, and the way Logan touched them, the almost imperceptible squeeze of his mother's hand as his fingers brushed the pearls, it was a signal. I'd seen it before. Years ago at a social event, Celeste had used the exact same gesture with another woman, a new arrival to their social circle, who was being quietly, elegantly ostracized. Logan had mimicked his mother then, a subtle, shared understanding passing between them. It was their silent code for, "This person is beneath us." They are to be tolerated, but never truly accepted. My own pearls, on Celeste's neck, used as a symbol of my own perceived inferiority. The final, brutal insult. The ledger was full. The blueprint was complete, and the time for polite smiles was over. The pearls on Celeste's neck gleamed under the chandelier, a silent, mocking testament to Logan's casual cruelty. That final insult, the casual regifting of something that was once mine, used as a symbol of my insignificance, solidified everything. The time for quiet observation was over. The game was in its final, brutal phase. In the weeks leading up to this dinner, my focus had been absolute. With Reagan's strategic guidance and Zaley's treasure trove of data, Atlas Corp had moved with surgical precision. We had leveraged the detailed financial records Zaley provided, exposing the true, dire state of Weaver manufacturing. Deacon's company was a house of cards, propped up by hidden debts and mismanaged assets. The tax records I discreetly copied from Herb's briefcase just hours ago were merely the final confirmation of what I already knew. My primary target had been the company's most valuable, yet neglected, internal patents. These were cutting-edge designs, buried under layers of old-world bureaucracy that Deacon had failed to monetize. Atlas Corp, through a series of complex, untraceable transactions, had quietly sold off key intellectual property rights to rival firms. This wasn't just about making a profit. It was about systematically stripping Weaver manufacturing of its future value, making it even more vulnerable. Simultaneously, we initiated a controlled short-selling strategy on the company's publicly traded stock. Using the undisclosed financial liabilities and the recent patent sales as leverage, we leaked carefully curated, legally permissible information to key analysts and financial news outlets. The market reacted exactly as planned. Weaver manufacturing stock, already teetering, began to plummet. It was a controlled demolition, orchestrated from the shadows. The most critical move, however, was the acquisition of Deacon's defaulted debt. He had taken out a massive, high-interest loan years ago, secured against a significant portion of the company's assets and the estate itself. He defaulted on it months ago, believing he could negotiate a new term with his old money connections. But the debt had been quietly sold off by the original lender to a third-party collection agency, then resold again. Atlas Corp had been the anonymous buyer. I now personally owned the debt Deacon had defaulted on, giving me the ultimate leverage. The legal papers confirming this were already filed, awaiting the right moment to be served. As these final pieces clicked into place, I noticed Logan, 36, growing increasingly agitated in the days leading up to the dinner. He was distracted, constantly on his phone, his usual smooth charm replaced by a brittle edge. He'd snap at me over minor things, his eyes holding a flicker of panic I hadn't seen before. "What is wrong with you, April?" he demanded one evening, his voice tight. "You're so quiet lately. It's making me anxious. You're always so calm. It's unsettling." He was gaslighting me, blaming me for the anxiety that was clearly his own. He was sensing the ground shifting beneath him, the subtle tremors of his world beginning to crack, but he couldn't pinpoint the source. He'd accused me of being unsupportive, of not understanding the pressures he was under. I didn't confront him. I just watched, my gaze steady, my silence a weapon. Every accusation, every frustrated sigh, every moment of his growing unease was another piece of evidence, confirming his self-absorption, his complete unawareness of the architect of his downfall. Even now, at the dinner table, he kept glancing at his phone, tucked discreetly under the edge of the tablecloth. His jaw was tight, his smile forced. He was clearly expecting something, dreading something. The main course was finished. Celeste was regaling us with a story about a summer in Provence. Deacon was nodding off. Herb Mills was quietly checking his own phone. Then, a soft vibration. Logan's hand shot to his pocket, pulling out his phone. He glanced at the screen, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly. A new email. He opened it, his face draining of color as he read. His thumb swiped rapidly, trying to dismiss it, to hide it. He shoved the phone back into his pocket, his hand trembling slightly. He cleared his throat, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow. "Just a spam email," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. He didn't know I knew. He didn't know that Reagan, 35, my best friend and partner in the silent war, had already confirmed its arrival. The email contained a formal corporate purchase agreement. It was from Atlas Corp. It was the official notification that Atlas Corp had acquired Weaver Manufacturing. He didn't know it yet, but I owned his father's company, and soon he would know. The dessert course arrived, a delicate trio of mini pastries and fresh berries. The clinking of forks against porcelain was the only sound for a moment, punctuated by Celeste's airy pronouncements about the superiority of French patisserie. Logan, 36, was still pale, his earlier forced laughter gone, replaced by a strained silence. He kept glancing at his phone, as if expecting another blow. Deacon, 67, looked bored, already anticipating his after-dinner brandy. Celeste, 64, was still radiating an air of untouchable superiority. "More coffee, dear?" Celeste asked, waving a hand at the silver pot. "Or perhaps April could be of assistance." Her tone was subtly patronizing, a final, gentle reminder of my place. My lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and calm, cutting through the genteel hum of the room, "I'd be happy to serve the coffee." A ripple of amusement went through the table. Deacon chuckled, a low rumble. Logan managed a weak smile, probably relieved I was playing along. Celeste's eyes glinted with satisfaction. "Oh, how thoughtful, April. See, Logan, I told you she was good help." I rose from my seat, my movements fluid and unhurried. I walked around the table, picking up the heavy silver coffee pot. As I approached Deacon, I paused. My hand, steady as a surgeon's, reached into the handbag I'd placed beside my chair. I pulled out the slick, velvet-covered envelope, the one I'd traced with my thumb at the beginning of the evening. It felt substantial, weighted with years of calculated silence and accumulated power. I didn't offer it to Logan. I didn't offer it to Celeste. I placed it with deliberate precision directly in front of Deacon Weaver. His eyes, heavy-lidded, flickered to the envelope, then to me, a flicker of confusion. "What's this, April?" he grumbled, reaching for it. But Celeste, ever the matriarch, ever the one in control, snatched it up first. Her manicured fingers broke the seal, pulling out the contents. Her eyes, sharp and judgmental, scanned the document. The color drained from her face, slowly, like a tide receding from the shore. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her pearl necklace, my pearls, seemed to mock her, gleaming brightly against her suddenly ashen skin. Deacon, seeing her reaction, leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Celeste, what is it?" She didn't answer him. Her gaze, wide and disbelieving, lifted from the paper and fixed on me. The document, a formal, stark white page, trembled slightly in her hand. Logan, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, finally looked up from his dessert. He saw Celeste's face, then the paper. His eyes narrowed. "Mother, what's going on?" Celeste's voice, when it came, was a choked whisper. This is a foreclosure notice." Her eyes darted to the bottom of the page, and the signee. It says, "April Walker." Deacon's fork clattered against his plate. He pushed himself up from the table, slowly, deliberately, his face darkening with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "Foreclosure? What the hell are you talking about, Celeste? And who is April Walker?" His gaze swung to me, demanding answers. Logan, too, had pushed back his chair. He stared at the document in his mother's hand, then at me. His mouth opened and closed, no words forming. He knew my last name. He knew exactly who April Walker was, but the shock, the sheer audacity of it, had rendered him speechless. Celeste, still pale, her voice barely audible, repeated, "Who? Who the hell is April Walker?" The fact that she didn't even know my last name, after 3 years of me being married to her son, after all my unseen work for their company, was the final perfect confirmation of their utter disregard. I met her gaze, my own eyes clear and unwavering. The polite smile was gone, replaced by the cold, razor-sharp one I'd practiced in the mirror. My voice, when I spoke, was calm, steady, and resonated with the power that filled the suddenly silent dining room. "Your class was right, Celeste," I said, my words like ice. "I don't belong here." I paused, letting the words hang in the air, letting them think I was confirming their long-held belief. Then I delivered the final, devastating blow. "I own it now." The silence that followed was deafening. Deacon's face turned a mottled purple. Logan finally found his voice, a strangled, disbelieving stutter. "April! What? What are you doing?" Celeste, her face contorted with a mixture of fury and humiliation, lifted her hand. The pearls on her neck seemed to vibrate with her rage. She swung, her palm connecting with a sharp crack against Logan's cheek. "You fool!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You absolute, useless fool!" She didn't spare me another glance. Her eyes, blazing with fury, were fixed on her son, the son who had brought this housekeeper into their lives only for her to tear it all down. With a gasp of outrage, Celeste Mills Weaver spun on her heel and stormed out of the dining room, leaving behind the wreckage of their perfect, privileged world. The slap echoed in the sudden, cavernous silence of the dining room. Celeste, 64, was gone, her furious footsteps fading down the long hallway. Deacon, 67, stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief, his eyes fixed on the foreclosure notice still clutched in Celeste's abandoned hand on the table. Logan, 36, swayed slightly, his cheek red from his mother's blow, his eyes wide and vacant. "April," Deacon finally managed, his voice a guttural growl. "What in God's name is this? What have you done?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "I told you, Deacon. I own it now." My voice was calm, almost conversational, a stark contrast to the chaos I had just unleashed. Atlas Corp acquired the holding firm that owns this estate and a controlling interest in Weaver Manufacturing. The foreclosure notice is simply the legal formality. The company acquisition was finalized weeks ago. Logan gasped, a choked sound. He remembered the email, the one he dismissed as spam, the corporate purchase agreement from Atlas Corp. He looked at me, His eyes filled with a dawning horror. You bought the company? My father's company? Your father's failing company, I corrected, my tone flat. And yes, it's mine. Deacon's face crumpled. His shoulders slumped. The arrogance, the bluster, the lifetime of entitlement. It all seemed to drain out of him in that moment. He looked like an old man, suddenly frail and utterly defeated. He sank back into his chair, staring blankly at the table. The next few days were a blur of controlled chaos. The formal notice of foreclosure was publicly filed. Press releases, meticulously drafted by Reagan, hit the wires, announcing Atlas Corp's acquisition of Weaver Manufacturing and, almost as an aside, the pending seizure of the Weaver family estate due to defaulted debt. The news spread like wildfire through their insular social circles. The whispers, the gossip, the quiet schadenfreude. I could almost hear it. Logan called me incessantly. His voice, once so smooth and confident, was now ragged, desperate. He begged, he pleaded, he raged. I didn't answer. I let him leave voicemails, each one a testament to his unraveling. The foreclosure hearing was set for a week later. I insisted it be held at the estate, in the very dining room where I had been introduced as the housekeeper. It was a strategic choice, a final public humiliation for them, a reclamation of the space where I had been so cruelly dismissed. When the day came, the dining room was stark. No gleaming silver, no crystal chandelier. The furniture was covered in white sheets, awaiting removal. Addison Underwood, 40, my real estate agent, stood by my side, professional and composed. Herbert Mills, 45, the family lawyer, was there, looking pale and harried. Deacon sat slumped in a chair, his face gray, his eyes vacant. Logan stood beside him, his hair disheveled, his suit rumpled. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. The proceedings were brief. The legal facts were undeniable. Atlas Corp owned the debt, the holding firm, and now the company. The estate was legally forfeit. As Addison finalized the paperwork, Logan stumbled towards me. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face streaked with tears. "April!" he choked out, his voice barely a whisper. "Please, can we talk? Privately?" I looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time in years. The charismatic facade was gone, replaced by a pathetic, broken man. He was no longer the person I had loved, the person I had sacrificed for. He was just a shell, stripped bare. "There's nothing to talk about, Logan," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back out of his reach. "But everything," he sobbed. "It's all gone. My life, my family, my future. I lost everything." His voice cracked. Did you ever love me, April? Was any of it real?" The question hung in the air, heavy with his desperation. I considered it for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Then I gave him my answer. It wasn't a shout. It wasn't a scream. It was a quiet, precise truth, delivered with the same cold clarity I had used to dismantle his world. "I loved who you pretended to be," I said. His shoulders shook. He sank to his knees, burying his face in his hands, his body racked with silent sobs. Deacon didn't even look up. Herb Mills averted his gaze. I didn't gloat. I didn't linger. There was no satisfaction in watching him break down, only a quiet, profound emptiness. The revenge wasn't about the performance. It was about the completion. The ledger was balanced. I turned and walked away, my footsteps echoing in the empty, stripped-down dining room. I didn't look back. The days following the foreclosure hearing were a whirlwind of legal finalizations and public announcements. The Weaver estate, once a symbol of impenetrable wealth and status, was officially seized. The press, already buzzing with the news of Weaver Manufacturing's acquisition by the mysterious Atlas Corp., had a field day with the dramatic details of the family's sudden downfall. The headlines were brutal, painting Deacon and Logan as incompetent, out-of-touch relics. Celeste, 64, remained out of sight, her social calendar abruptly empty. Logan, 36, was nowhere to be found, his phone disconnected. Their world, built on a foundation of inherited privilege and my unseen labor, had crumbled. My new office was in the heart of what used to be Weaver Manufacturing's corporate headquarters. The old, heavy oak furniture had been replaced with sleek modern designs. The walls, once adorned with portraits of stern-faced Weaver ancestors, were now bare, awaiting new art. The air, once thick with the stale scent of old money and decay, now hummed with a different kind of energy. I sat at my new desk, the morning sun streaming through the large windows. My title was CEO. The company, now fully integrated into Atlas Corp., was being meticulously restructured. It wasn't just about dismantling the old, it was about building something new, something efficient and ethical. Zaylee, 28, now my chief of operations, bustled in, a stack of reports in her hand. Her eyes, once bright with youthful ambition, now held a sharp, confident glint. She was thriving, overseeing the integration of departments, streamlining processes, and implementing the very strategies I had ghost-written for Logan years ago. April, the Q3 projections are looking even better than we anticipated, she announced, her voice crisp, and the patent sales have generated enough capital to fully fund the new R&D division. We're on track. Excellent, Zaylee, I replied, a genuine smile touching my lips. Keep pushing. We're not just turning a profit, we're building a legacy. Reagan, 35, walked in, a mischievous grin on her face. She was my strategic partner, overseeing the legal and financial aspects of the transition. Just got off the phone with Ulysses Little, she said, referring to the anonymous corporate buyer who had helped us stage the acquisition. He sends his regards, says the Weaver family is officially off the grid. No more trust funds, no more hidden assets. Just gone. A small, almost imperceptible nod from me. It wasn't about reveling in their destitution. It was about the quiet satisfaction of knowing the scales had been balanced. Behind my new office door, pinned discreetly to the corkboard, was a copy of the velvet foreclosure envelope. It was a tangible reminder of the moment, the turning point, not for gloating, but as a constant silent testament to what I had overcome and what I had achieved. A few days later, a thick cream-colored envelope arrived at the office. No return address, but the elegant looping script on the front was unmistakable. Celeste Mills Weaver. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it. Was it an apology? A threat? A desperate plea? I didn't open it. I simply placed it on the corner of my desk, beneath a stack of incoming reports. It would stay there, unopened. Its contents didn't matter. Her words, whatever they were, held no power over me anymore. I looked out the window at the city skyline, a sprawling tapestry of ambition and opportunity. For years, I had worked in the shadows, my intelligence and efforts dismissed, my identity erased. I had been told I didn't belong, that I was just the help. They had tried to keep me small, to keep me silent, to keep me invisible. But respect wasn't earned from people like them. It was taken. And sometimes karma doesn't come around on its own. Sometimes it needs an extra push. He called me the help. Now I help myself to everything.